Hi everybody, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 379. Kicked off with c4, playing the English defense, or English opening for the first time in a while. My opponent responds e5, one of the principal responses, reverse Sicilian. I go with the g3. G3 or knight c3 can be played here. Pretty much with the same idea. You're trying to control the light squares with the bishop and knight. So they get played in one move order or another. Knight f6. Now come out with the knight. And now d6 is a bit rare. Sometimes black likes to try and get in the move d5 all in one go. So d6 is it's not asking for a whole lot from the position. Probably bishop b4 is an interesting way to play here too. So d6 though. And I go with bishop g2. And you see, the English opening is one of these openings where the chess engine really doesn't think it gives a whole lot for white. But the advantages of the English come, I think, later in the game. You sort of it's a slow build-up, so they're not particularly apparent here at this level. But after a while, you'll see, actually, I get a pretty good position here. And now I go with e3. I'm going to build up with e3 and d4. It's not in the opening book at this point. Knight f3 is the only move that's been played here. But you'll see it's a reasonable way to play. In fact, d4 could have been played immediately too. So anyway, we're out of the opening book. But I went with the slow build-up with e3. I like to play after d4. I like to be able to take back with a pawn if I can, if I'm not suffering some other penalty for that, because then I get this pawn center with pawns on c4 and d4. It gives me a little more control here. So if I can accomplish that, I feel pretty good about the opening. Knight to e2, and he castles, and I get my move d4 in. Takes, and so I've got just the position I want, and my opponent goes knight c6. So I think I'm doing pretty good here, and yeah, the engine agrees. Castling or h3, these are all moves that are in the position. h3 would have prevented bishop g4. I found this pin a little bit uncomfortable, and I didn't really want to play f3. It creates kind of a funny-looking pawn structure and blocks this bishop. But the engine does think that's the best move. Anyway, I was trying to avoid f3. So I came up with the idea of playing a3 and queen to d3. And the problem with that is that black has a very simple reply, which is bishop to f4. So right here, I have an excellent position. I can just ignore the pin for a while and play a move like bishop g4, bishop f4, continue to develop my pieces, rook e1 even. But instead, I try to deal with this, and the way I choose to deal with it is not the best way. So a3, it's kind of a slow move. Rook e8, putting more pressure, and now queen d3 unpinning, but just walking right into this move, bishop f5, and I have to move the queen again. And so just in the space of a couple of short moves, I've gone from a good position to a bad position. And it goes from bad to worse here. I drop to d2, not realizing that knight a5 is a really strong move here, because knight a5 not only threatens to win a pawn here, but to come into b3 and fork my queen and my rook. So I'm just kind of stumbling from one from one bad spot to another, and black is really winning at this point. So I drop my queen back to d1. It's basically the only move to defend this b3 square. And if I'm given time, I'll play pawn to b3 and shore up c4 there. But clearly, I wandered into something I shouldn't have with those series of moves. So something to watch out for if you ever find yourself in this position. My opponent doesn't play the logical knight takes c4. The interesting thing is the engine even likes the move c6 better. The point is my opponent is a little bit concerned about the b pawn, but if he takes on c4, just to take a look at this, put it on the board, and I take on b7, he has this move rook b8. And, I'm going to have to move the bishop, and he's going to have some pressure here against my pawns. I guess he's not picking up the pawn, but there's still an advantage to black. So that's a reasonable way to play. Playing rook b8 immediately, gives me a chance to try and organize my defenses with b3. And so now it's once again an even game. But I after knight c6, a few moves later, I make a mistake. Bishop e3 is okay, but I probably should go directly to f4 or g5. They're just more active posts. But I was concerned about defending the d-pawn. So he goes knight g4 and starts harassing my bishop. And now there's already a threat to take the bishop and win a pawn because he's got a rook and a knight, both looking at the e3 square there. So I could just move the bishop away, bishop f4, and keep an advantage. But instead I wanted to try and hold on to this pawn structure here. But I neglected the fact that, well, you'll see what happens. After knight d5, he plays first bishop to e4, and I go knight e to f4. So I'm bringing my knights out and trying to get active, allowing him to trade off this bishop. It's still about even. I guess my next mistake comes right here after knight takes e3 check. I have to take back with the pawn because this pawn, my d pawn, is under defended at this point. He's gotten rid of the bishop that was defending it. The knight that was defending it has moved to f4. So I've left this my d pawn under defended, and instead I took back with the knight, trying to preserve this pawn structure, but of course this just loses a pawn. So I really should be losing the game, and especially after this next move. I played knight e to d5, completely ignoring the threat to my rook, and he can just pick up the rook. So the game should really be over here. Bishop takes, queen takes. It looks like maybe I have a little pressure on this diagonal, knight coming into f6. We'll see some of these themes showing up later. But he can meet all of these threats with knight to e5. I don't have a good way to chase that knight away. I have to, if I wanted to play the move f4, for example, to chase the knight away, I have to reposition this knight, get it out of the way. So knight c3 is the engine's recommended move, just retreating and reorganizing, or a4. But anyway, yeah, white is, black. Black is up the exchange and a pawn and should just go on to win. So my opponent, however, was playing really quickly. It was like an 8-minute game, and he goes from an excellent position where he's just winning to a position that's about even and a little bit tricky. So he kicks my knight with g5, but this creates weaknesses. So this move g5 is very suspicious. Creates holes around the king position, and my knight gets an interesting square on h5, so now I'm doubled up on the f6 square, and I start to have some tactical ideas. For example, a fork here hitting his king and his rook. So here, bishop takes rook is no longer good. He didn't play this, but if he had tried bishop takes rook here, now the threats along this diagonal and my control over, let's try again, the threats along this diagonal and my control over the f6 square with the two knights gives me a winning attack here. So if he tries knight e5 to block it, I can throw in the move f4 and chase the knight away. So this is looking pretty good for white. So he can't take my rook anymore. He had that one chance, and that move is no longer good. He tried the move f5. This is keeping things about even. Let's see. Yeah, that's f5 is one of the top engine choices. So f5 is an okay move. And then I go rook to b1, just getting my rook out of take. I don't want to have to always worry about him taking that rook. He retreats his bishop back to g7. And now I play the move rook to e1. And already I was starting to have ideas of tactics on the f6 square. I'm just trying to arrange it. And he plays the move knight e5 to block the file, but this move loses. The knight here is not an effective blockader because I can chase it away with f4. And he has to give up at least a piece here. Let's see. He takes, which is a correct move. I take back. And right here, he needs to play a move like queen h4, counterattacking. And this is with best play. I get a slight advantage here. I actually win a piece. Knight takes. And then he can either save his knight or take my knight. Knight to g4 is the best move, threatening mate over here. I throw in one rook check. Rook takes e8 check. And then knight to f6 check. Yeah, I guess I can get away with this. King takes g7, knight takes rook check, king to f8, and now queen to g1, finally defending this pawn. And so if we count the material, queen, rook, and knight versus queen and knight, he's going to round up this knight, though. He's going to take immediately. Yeah, so it's counting material too soon. So, okay, so I don't win a piece, but I win the exchange. And he's got a pawn for the exchange, but good position for white. So that's with best play. If he had been aware of all the threats, it's pretty tricky way to play that. So f4, this was played, g takes f4, g takes f4, and here he needed to try this tricky move, queen to h4 to stay on the game. He played knight to g4, maybe thinking to follow up with queen h4, but now I can just kick the knight away, h3. And oh, notice that I can't go ahead with my planned tactic right away. If I go knight f6, I'll just show you. It's kind of a cute response he has here. He can take it first. Yeah, that doesn't work at all because it just loses a piece. Let's see, what was I thinking? If I take here, he takes, and then I go for this fork, then yeah, he can still take on f6. So he's just defending everything there. There's also the idea of the knight coming here and forking my pieces if the rook is not defending that square, if the knight and the rook are not defending that square. So anyway, none of those techniques work, but I play h3 to kick the knight away, so it's no longer guarding the f6 square and no longer threatening the check on e3. He plays knight to f6, a reasonable try, but c6. Yeah, c6 is a way to try to keep playing and giving up the knight. So he's basically losing a piece at this point. He goes knight f6, and then I get the nice finish. I can take with either knight here. It's important. My original plan was to take with the rook first, but you have to notice that he can take back with the knight. So yeah, rook takes e8, knight takes e8 is only a slight edge for white. But if you take the knight first, it didn't matter with which knight. I could have taken with either knight. He's in check. There's a nasty fork here, and the engine is actually recommending queen takes f6. That's the only way to maintain control of this square, but you have to give up this queen, so that's not good. Anyway, he played the more natural move, bishop takes f6, and then I throw in the move rook takes e8 check. It's important to get these moves in the right order. If you take the bishop first, he can take back with the queen, but take the rook first, and he has to respond to that. It's check, and he resigned here, but if queen takes rook, then knight takes f6 is check and picks up the queen. So an easy win from there, and a nice finish to that game. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.